Good afternoon, and welcome to our series of panels. This is our panel number 1, and this particular panel looks at HBCU students and reshaping African and diaspora images, narratives, and relationships. And I'm moderating. I'm Donna Patterson. I am the chair of the Department of History, Political Science, and Philosophy here at Delaware State University, and I am the director of Africana Studies. Our panelists today include first, Robert Kool Bell of Kool and the Gang fame, Eddy Maloka, who is the CEO of APRM, Maneesh Pandeya, who's at Delaware State University, he's a Fulbright scholar, Milton Alimadi, who's at John Jay College. Amnesty Church can't be with us today. Our next panelist is Dr. Marshall Stevenson, who is a dean at the University of Maryland Eastern Shore. And our final panelist is Thomas McClary, who was one of the founding members of the Commodores, the singing group. Some of you may know Lionel Richie and the others. And so welcome all of them, and we will jump in. All of them will begin with remarks, and then we'll follow up with some questions and discussion, and then open it to Q&A. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Robert Kool Bell, Kool and the Gang, Kool and the Gang. And this is a great day, and it's great for me to be here in terms of the unification of a DSU in Africa. And we have been going to Africa for many years. Nigeria, we did a project called The Children in Africa, or The Children of Africa. We played in Kenya. We played in South Africa, Uganda, Mozambique, Angola. It goes on and on. But I'm happy to see what's going on here today, because Africa is the way, and we need to come together here in the United States and the DSU and Africa. So again, I'm proud and happy to be here. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much. My name is Eddy Maloka. I came here last year, I think. I was invited, and we started this process. I'm with the African Peer Review Mechanism. You saw members of the African Peer Review Mechanism this morning. So we are here. We want to work with DSU. We want also to, like Ezrah was saying, our thinking is that the DSU should be the focal point for bringing together historically black universities to work with us. Some of our colleagues from the African Union were supposed to be here, but there are 2 other meetings happening in Addis Ababa. There is a body in the African Union called ECOSOC, the Economic Commission, what is it called? Economic Council for Social Affairs. It's a body that is responsible for relations with the African diaspora. And it's an organ. It has a secretariat there based in Addis Ababa. So their members were supposed to be here and until yesterday, but then there's something happening in Addis Ababa. So everybody now is being grounded in Addis Ababa. So, but we have discussed with them that when we come back, we are going to be interacting with them to feed into what their work, what we are doing. And then the second component of the African Union that should have been here is the African Union Academy. So the African Union Academy is the one that is responsible for exchange programs in the African Union. At the APRM, we receive interns, but we don't recruit interns directly. It's the African Union Academy that recruits interns and then send them to the various organs and institutions of the African Union. So we had discussed with them that we would like to see Delaware working together with other historically black universities. You constitute yourselves, and then you bring us your graduate students. And you work with us through the African Union Academy. They have already agreed. And then your students, they come, and then they get placed in different organs of the African Union. They come, they spend a month, 2 months, and so on and so on. But we have to look at the costing aspect of it. So we have to look at how we share the cost. When they are with our institutions, we take charge, but maybe when they come, these are the things that we can look at. And then the other area where we work as the African peer review mechanism, we deploy teams. You saw Professor Gambari in the morning. He's the chairperson of a team of eminent persons who are chosen by African presidents. The African presidents, they say, we can't review each other. So let's get somebody we agree on who can review us. So then they go around and then they pick a number of Africans. We've got a panel of eminent persons, it's 9 people. So these 9 people, they share the countries among themselves. So Ambassador Gambari, Professor Gambari is the chairman of them. So there are a few ladies and maybe 3 ladies, and then others are gently people. So what they do is that then they send teams to go and conduct reviews of countries. And then they write reports of those countries. And then they go to president and they say, this is what we found is happening in your country. And the president responds, and then there's a discussion and so on. So our work as a secretariat is to facilitate, is to make sure all these things, to recruit teams, etc., to work with the panel. So I was saying yesterday to my colleagues at the DSU here that channel is also available to experts here at the DSU. We also, so where you can, when, like, for example, this year, the missions that are confirmed is Niger and Egypt. Egypt will happen in September. So when we deploy teams, there are about 20, 30 people, experts, different institutions, technical, and we are in the 4 areas: economics, politics, issues about poverty, women, gender, etc., etc., and then the 4th one is corporate governance. So we deploy teams, and then they go to across the country. They meet with opposition parties. They meet with the members of parliament. So they meet with the media. They meet with civil society, and then they do the report on their findings. What is this happening, and so on. A number of people, they do it. They are done by external agencies. But our views in Africa is that we must review ourselves. So this is what the reviews are doing. So we were saying to colleagues from the DSU here to say that we will open this door to the DSU to send some of your experts from the HBUs, economists, sociologists, and agricultural experts, and so on, to come and participate in our review mission. So those are the 3 areas that we've been talking about: the exchange, where we get your students to come as interns and to participate in African Union institutions through the AU Academy. The second one is, of course, we need to get the ECOSOC on board fully. They are on board. Unfortunately, yesterday, he was the colleague who was supposed to come. So we need to have that communication, interaction again with the ECOSOC, so that then you are then plugged into the AU diaspora processes. And then thirdly, of course, the work that I was talking about with the APRM, where you can come and participate in our review missions, and also in the other technical assessments that we conduct of the country. So those are some things, but we could talk more about other things. Time is not available for all of us. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Hi, I'm Professor Maneesh Pandeya. I'm the visiting Fulbright professor here at the Department of Mass Communication. I came last August, and starting from the application where I was asked that what would you contribute as a fellow, I had put Africa as one of the areas in which I would like my institution to explore opportunities. And I'm really happy today to be part of this panel discussion, and also to see that mission of mine actually taking shape and taking off from here. And I will begin by just saying 2 lines, which is also African proverb, but it is also said in different languages, including my country, that if you want to go quickly, you run alone. If you want to go far, you run together. So I think and run together means it is all talking about the clan, tribe, family. And I think for HBCU like us, DSU and other institutions also, the bigger family is back home. The roots are back home in Africa. It is one umbilical cord which we don't cut. We don't want to cut. It is something we don't want to snap, but it is to be made strengthened. And as a journalist by profession, I see a lot of opportunities, a lot of grants, and a lot of courses also from faculty to faculty, institution to institution, from student to student. There are tons and tons of opportunities right at the government level, at the corporate level, at the philanthropy and the think tank levels to associate. There can be many, starting from building course curriculum for those institutions back home in Africa, to having exchanges of students, to even sending our students as maybe a credit-based program for, say, 2 months or 3 months, or maybe during their summer program on a fellowship sort of thing. It can be a great beginning to explore those opportunities to build a long, sustained relationship with the country of origin. Thank you.
Greetings, sisters and brothers. Thank you for coming. My name is Milton Alimadi, and I publish Black Star News, and I'm also an adjunct professor at John Jay College, teaching African history. I like the fact that my colleague here mentioned the word roots, and it reminded me of a short speech by Malcolm X. It's on YouTube, so you can go watch it. And the title is, "You Can't Hate the Roots of a Tree Without Hating the Tree." And Malcolm was talking about the importance of making the connection with Africa. And he said historically, the colonial powers demonized Africa because they wanted to create a separation between Africa and the diaspora. And he said as a result of that, sisters and brothers in this country did not want to be associated with Africa. He said, we even ended up hating the shapes of our nose, the texture of our ear, of our hair, the complexion of our skins, because all of that connected us to something that was allegedly repugnant. And he said there was a reason why the colonial powers presented Africa as the epitome of backwardness. There was a design behind it. And I always strongly recommend this short speech that's on YouTube. But briefly, let me tell you why I ended up in journalism. First, I wanted to go to film school. But my beloved late father said, if you can pay for it, good luck. So I did not go to film school. And then I studied economics. But my true calling and pull was always toward journalism. And what disturbed me the most was how Africa was presented, particularly in Western media. I always found myself writing letters to the editor, the New York Times, the Daily News, complaining about representations of Africa and African diaspora. Could be the way Haitians were represented as well. So eventually, friends convinced me to go back to school, to become a journalist. So I went to Columbia. And while at Columbia, and I had an opportunity to write my master's thesis, I said, you know what? I'll write on a topic that has always been pulling me, the historical representation of Africa in Western media. So I went to the archives, I read articles from the New York Times dating back to 1851. There was one editorial that I remember very vividly, 1851. Said the problem with Africans, I'm now paraphrasing, of course, was that they were somehow related to animals like the crocodile, but they had a bit of human sensibilities as well. So as a result, they were caught between the animal world and the human world, and that was the dilemma. And what was the solution? Colonization by Britain. That editorial, 1851. I can give you the precise date because it's in the book that I ended up writing, but I'll get to that in a minute. And then I went and I read the books written by the so-called European explorers that went to Africa and ended up naming lakes that had African names that are today called Lake Victoria, for example, Mount Elizabeth, for example. After I did all of that, I then wrote my master's paper. I tried to get it published. It was accepted by the Columbia Journalism Review. but never published. And then I found out why. They were afraid of the New York Times, how the New York Times might react to it. So what did I decide to do? I decided to publish it myself as a book, The Hearts of Darkness, How White Writers Created the Racist Image of Africa. And I brought copies available for you students today. And one final word. I want all of us to contribute towards changing this narrative, and we can, and I'll make some suggestions as this discussion continues. Thank you.
Yes, good afternoon. I'm Dr. Marshall Stevenson. I'm Dean of Social Sciences, Education, and the Arts at the University of Maryland Eastern Shore. I've been affiliated with this fine university and also Dillard University in New Orleans, so I have quite a bit of experience with HBCUs and the central role that Africa really plays. Because as we discussed today, this is the 400th anniversary, and it was with the transatlantic slave trade and slavery and after slavery that there was even a need for HBCUs. So we have a strong part and cultural roots in this country. I'm a historian by trade of the African American experience, and as I sat here and I thought about all that we've talked about, I believe, Dr. Osei, it was 100 years ago this year that W.E.B. Du Bois and others actually held a Pan-African Congress. So here we are 100 years later, symbolically trying to do the same thing. That's a good thing, but it's not necessarily a good thing because we still have a long way to go and quite a bit to accomplish. It's also significant, I think, I'm going to put my remarks kind of in historical terms, that there are people here from Lincoln University. Anybody who knows any history knows that Kwame Nkrumah, president of Ghana, went to Lincoln University. So there's that academic connection that cannot be lost and must be maintained. There was a mention here of student exchanges, and I've always been a proponent of that. Been to Africa, been to China, and I think once students study abroad, their world and their whole thinking about life is transformed. And I think with all the stakeholders and all the people here and where we want to go forward, I think it would be so impactful if at the end of the day, every student who attends an HBCU in this country can take a trip to Africa within the 4 years of their matriculation. I think that's a goal we need to work towards, as well as having African students come and visit the African American experience here. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Thomas McClary, and I'm the founder of a group called the Commodores. On the campus of Tuskegee, Alabama, as a freshman, I was standing in the registration line, and I heard this guy whistling, and I turned to him and I said, "Hey, man, are you a musician? I'm trying to put a band together for the freshman talent show." This guy was Lionel Richie. And he says, "My grandmother lives across the street, meet me there." And I round up some guys in the audition, and maybe, long story short, we formed a group at a historically black college of Tuskegee, Alabama, where the roots of not only our founding fathers as it relates to a lot of academics and historic scientific discoveries were made, we found our soul and musically. And when I think about the music of Africa and how it has influenced every aspect of the music business, from blues to rock to country to all of it, hip hop. And it is time that we give back to where our mother country instilled that innate ability to translate music around the world through the hearts and the souls of people back to where the country that it originated from. And so as I spoke with our ambassador, we're going to do just that with a bugle call song that will call all of us back to where we belong and to initiate that whole energy of saying, hey, you know what? We have a theme song that will remind us where we are. Every time we try to drift away, this is our theme song. Let's call back to home where we belong and get together where we can be a family and know that our hearts are not only tied together, but our souls are tied together. And so I am excited about all that's happening, and that I think that, you know, when it's all said and done, good things will come to those that have, we've waited a long time. 40 years is a long time. And I think we're way overdue. And so I'm looking forward to getting involved in serving and doing whatever I can to recruit Lionel Richie and everybody else in the music industry so that we can pull off one of the greatest songs since We Are the World.
Okay, thank all of you for your preliminary comments. I'm just gonna ask one question, because I'm gonna try to wrap us up a little early just so we can almost get back on track, and then we'll do some Q&A with the audience, so I won't ask too many questions. So effectively, some of you have brought up different things that you think could really help in reshaping these images, using HBCUs, using our students, and partnerships with people, some of your organizations and other organizations in the world. A lot of HBCUs came up in your discussions: Tuskegee, UMES, Lincoln, Dillard, Del State. And so really thinking about the impact of HBCU. So I really would like to hear more about how you see this happening. How do you see with your organizations or if your university in making this happen with our students?
You know, I've been working on this Africa and Africa diaspora relationship for some years, and at the African Union, when we were moving from the OAU to the African Union, when we were creating the ECOSOC, the statutes, et cetera, so the debates even around the sixth region, et cetera, were in there. Then we did what we call the Africa Meeting of Africa, Africans of the Meeting of Intellectuals of Africa and the Diaspora. We had two. CR1, we used to call them the CR1 in Senegal, then we did the other one in Brazil, and there was supposed to be a follow-up to Brazil. It never happened. And then as a South African diplomat, we hosted the African diaspora meetings, I think 2003, and when President Mbeki was there, we did one in Jamaica, and then there were follow-ups, and then I think the last one, it was a summit, but that summit happened when there were a lot of changes in the African Union and also within South Africa itself. And looking back, I think that the problem with how we have been dealing with Africa's relations with the African diaspora, we've been working with individuals. Very prominent, powerful African-American individuals in the Caribbean and here in North America, I mean also in Europe. If you go to Europe, they are very well established, especially in Belgium, in France. They are well established African-American African diaspora networks there. But we are working with individuals. And that has been even the difficulty when we're dealing with the issue of the sixth region, that if we designate the African diaspora as sixth region, how are we going to interact with it? Because the African Union is a multilateral organization. It's an organization of sovereign states. Then we thought that, then there was confusion that there is this decision, but there is no such a decision. It's just a language that developed to say the sixth region, but that such a decision was tabled by one country, but it didn't get the support because of that issue. And then the compromise was that we need to work with African diaspora institutions in other countries, but then in the case of the Caribbean, because in the Caribbean you do have, outside Africa, the Caribbean is the only area where you have Africans, people of African descent who are in charge of states. So we then said, then we work with the CARICOM, then we started inviting the CARICOM and to our meetings. I remember invited Jamaica, etc., to come and participate and have observer status, but that was not sustained. It will be happen now, it was not sustained. But the issue has been that the point I'm trying to make is that the relationships have been largely with very prominent African diaspora individuals. And what I see here, Donna, with what we are trying to do, is that we have been able to find a model that will help institutionalize these relations. Because if you work with a very prominent, powerful African-American scholar at one institution, and then he ages 2 years later or he has a heart attack, that whole relationship is gone. So I see all the years, all these people that we have worked with, it never really got institutionalized. We nearly never really linked up with the institutions in those areas where they are. So what I think the success of this, the potential that this one has, if you can manage to mobilize the historically black universities and get the Black Congress and organize formations of African-American entities in North America, this is what will make it work. And then we combine it with the Caribbean where you have the state actors, then we'll be able to have a very powerful, you could say, African diaspora and Africa relations. In Europe is different because you have a very strong African diaspora community there in France and so on and so on. But it's configured different. They didn't go there as slaves. They went there as immigrants except one or two. But here in North America, you have our people who were brought here as slaves and their descendants. So if we can have a very strong institutional foundation in North America and in the Caribbean where there are states, and then we have Africa, then it will be able to build a very strong partnership that we are talking about. But partnership with individuals, it works, but it's unsustainable. So you need on the side of the DSU to really do a lot of work in building a network of institutions on the American side. The Caribbean, they are well organized. University of West Indies, the government, the CARICOM, it's easy. And then we can work on a strategy on how we get our brothers and sisters in Europe. So really, if you ask me, I think that it has to take an institutional model. We have to take an institutional approach. Relying solely on prominent individuals has its own limitations. I'm not saying anything about you. Cool, you are a prominent and very powerful personality. We still value and need you in the process. Thank you very much.
You know I love that.
I'll quickly add one more point. When it comes to changing the narrative, I'll give it a third-party audit because I'm from India. We have to be more aspirational and competitive. We have to. That has been my observation here in HBCU and many more which I visited during my Fulbright grant. There are tons and hundreds of grants lying unused. Why? Because we do not have the capacity to go for those grants. So first, as a journalist, we get informed and then we inform others. So there is a message that we first build our capacity and then build capacity of our motherland people because not only culturally or historically we have the right, we will have the rights to train them. And through those grants which are available in those government sectors, public sectors, corporate sectors, we have to build those people-to-people, institution-to-institution contact. So it's all about, I'm not mincing any words, we have to build our capacity, we have to strengthen ourselves, because both India and Africa has been ruled only because they got subjugated and oppressed because we took life as it came, and we got subjugated, oppressed. We were never aspirational. But it's time to stand up.
Once again, I agree with my brother. We have to really take the initiative. We need to have our own version of Africa, an African diaspora version of Al Jazeera, where we can influence global media. You know, the demonization of Africa is not by accident, it's by design. It was meant to justify, first, the enslavement of Africans, and I have a slight correction. We should refrain from the word slaves. We should use enslaved Africans. I think it's an important distinction. And then it was used to justify colonization of Africa. And today it's used to justify neo-colonial exploitation of Africa. So when the New York Times talks about tribal wars, what is that? What is a tribal war? Behind that, there's always exploitation going on. So the war in the Congo was portrayed as a tribal war. That's nonsense, because corporations were exploiting resources from Eastern Congo at the same time.
That's right.
So that is a mask. Originally it was called the white man's burden, the so-called manifest duty of Europeans to go and colonize Africa in order to civilize them. In the course of this colonization, 10 million Congolese were killed under King Leopold. What kind of civilization is that? That, to me, is the ultimate act of barbarity. And you claim you are spreading civilization in Africa. So it's important for us all to become soldiers on behalf of Africa, countering this negative media portrayal and demonization. And it can be effective. We can do it individually, and we can do it collectively. If you set yourself up here as Delaware Conscious Africans organization, and you write to a newspaper editor to counter a certain article, or you write to a producer at any of the major networks, including CNN and BBC, they won't ignore you. And I speak from experience. I used to engage the New York Times on a constant basis about the use of the word tribesmen and tribal in Africa, because I said, once you designate it as tribal, it means your reporters don't have to go and do the reporting and explain to us the issues that are involved in those conflicts. So that's number one, lazy journalism. But that's number two, condoning this as a mask for corporations to continue exploiting Africa. And guess what? Eventually they started writing back to me, the publisher himself and the editors, and very rarely do you find the word tribesmen or tribal in connection to a story related to Africa. In fact, mostly you find it now when they're discussing Afghanistan and other countries, but not Africa anymore. So that's why I insist that we all become soldiers on behalf of reshaping the image and representation of Africa in Western corporate media. Thank you, sisters and brothers.
Okay, you can come down if you have a question, and we'll take, we don't have a lot of time, but we'll take 2 or 3.
Okay. First of all, I want to thank you for having this event. Want to give my greetings to the panel, in particular, Elder Bell and Elder McClary. As a 40-year frustrated club and mobile DJ, I'd like to think I have almost every record you were involved with, at least going back to Machine Gun and Who's Going to Take the Weight.
Very appropriate for today. Who is going to take the weight?
I am also here representing actually 3 different organizations. There's the Pan-African Federalist Movement, which is a grassroots-oriented group that is coming from various parts of the diaspora that's trying to organize people of African descent on the ground to form what they're calling they're actually pushing for a federated, united African continent, along the lines of what the African Union is also doing. The other organization I will represent here is the 6th Region Diaspora Caucus. We are a grassroots Pan-African organization organized in 6 states, Central America, Eastern Caribbean, Europe, and Dimona, Israel. And we're trying to answer the African Union initiative to essentially establish that presence in the Economic, Social, and Cultural Council. We've been beating our heads against the wall for roughly the last 10, 12 years or so toward that. Seeing that we have, of course, educators, we have artists, we have publishers and journalists, and we also have members of the African Union here. My question on behalf of those organizations and the Maryland Council of Elders, which was formed a year ago, is this: how can we move this process forward? Is there a way that, for instance, perhaps I or other members of my organization can engage in more in-depth discussions with as many people who are here today as possible, so that we can move this process that we've been pushing for the last 12 years forward so we don't beat our heads against the wall for another 12 years. And I'd like to find out if there's a way that we can start that somehow today before I go back to Baltimore. Thank you.
Thank you for your question. If one or two other people want to come up, why don't you ask your questions now and they will answer them. They will group them together and they answer in the interest of time.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming. Kwame Nkrumah once said, "The task ahead is great indeed, and heavy is the responsibility." This question is more so pertaining to the economical development of Africa. What are the thoughts of establishing incubators to build entrepreneurial momentum and to establish a middle class? Thank you.
Hi everyone, good afternoon. My name is Malaya Johnson. I'm a student from Lincoln University. I'm a sophomore. And my question is, what do you guys have suggestions for involving the youth in bridging the gap between the African Americans and the African diaspora? This is my professor.
Coincidence. Thank you. And I met, perhaps the ambassador may have to something to say, but I see people from the AU. I'm Dr. Ezrah from Lincoln University. Just one simple question. We have the ECOWAS, SADC, and all that. Now we have the 6th region. All of these regions have common passport and so on, and easy travel. What are you doing to enable the diaspora go to anywhere in Africa and do what they need to do?
But the other side did not have, they were speaking highly of you, my brother, our founder of the Commodores. Maybe he's the one who wants to take the floor. Machine gun.
Oh, okay. Well, obviously, before we can do anything to move forward, we have to have a mental state of mind that says we're positively moving forward. And music happens to be a way of really getting to the mind. And so as we compose and as we utilize this medium, obviously we want to have the ability for the youth and all demographics to come together. And so, and of course, social media and all of the other platforms that music is undergirded with. So subliminally, even if it's a commercial, advertising, anything to do with what we're doing, if they constantly hear this music and their subconscious, and it become consciously part of what they will eventually be doing.
Yes, also, Dustin Baker and myself, we have a project called Kool-Baker, Solar Energy. And one of our plans is to bring power concerts to Africa, where the actual show is powered by solar energy, the grid, not the old generators. But not only that, to bring different groups. It's not always what's the guy, Bono and all these groups to come to Africa want to do something. It's time for us to do something. And with these solar energy concerts, it's not only just the concert itself, we can also light up the villages, with solar energy. So we have an album called Light of the Worlds. We have a song called Higher Planes. We've been down too long, getting down too strong. It's time to keep lifting us up to a higher planes of what? Understanding. A higher planes of working together, education. That's what it's all about. When I did the thing in Nigeria, it was blessed by Nelson Mandela before he passed, Mary Makeba, Hugh Masekela, and the Commodores traveled with us. And that was called For the Children of Africa, because the children is our future. You are our future. That's what we need to do, to find that connection. And I pray that one day that will happen.
No, thank you very much. I think the questions are pointed. I think the issues that were raised about the entrepreneurship in Africa and then the youth. About the youth, I want to introduce Mr. Sanjima Jr. from Chad. So you can see Mr. Sanjima Jr. from Chad. I won't say about what the one who's interested in knowing what they can contribute as the youth. Mr. Sanjima will give you some suggestions. And then the issues that were raised by our elder here about the initiative here, which is so impressive. We just need, on the African side, we need to get the ECOSOC right. We do have an ECOSOC. In the ECOSOC, we're supposed to have an African diaspora representation. So I have not been in touch with the ECOSOC for years. But there is a provision in the African Union for African diaspora participation. But the question is, how strong and effective is that representation? She says she will talk to it, and she can be. So I'm not the one. She can be able to inform you. But then on the issue of entrepreneurship, so maybe Ambassador, you can also. The ambassador will also deal with the issue of entrepreneurship, because the issue of entrepreneurship and the youth is very, very key. But how do we involve the African diaspora communities in this initiative is
Well, I have an answer for you, my brother. What we have done out of the African Union mission, we have several projects, but the main one is going to be called the Wakanda One Project, which actually is the African Diaspora Centers of Excellence. We have divided the country, actually the Americas, into 12 regions. 8 within the United States, Canada is region 9, Caribbean is region 10, Central America is 11, South America is 12. And what we are doing now is in the process of appointing chairpersons for the diaspora chapters that we're going to establish. We have already established Region 6, which is Texas and the surrounding states. We have established Minnesota. We have established Michigan. On the 23rd, I'm going to be hitting Georgia. On the 26th, I'm going to be going back to Dallas, because they are now appointing other chapters within the region. I'm going back to Minnesota on the 25th. They're going to be also introducing new chairs for the other states within the region. So we are here in Delaware. I've already sensitized Delaware, and I'm going to be going back for the establishment of the chairs and steering committee. So we are organizing for the purposes of having an extensive professional database. So in a nutshell, the reporting structure would be, we have the headquarters in DC, which reports to ECOSOC and CEDAW at in Addis. From the headquarters, we have 8 regions within the United States. So you need to find out which region you belong to. And then within the region, there are going to be states, which average of 5 to 7 states per region, each one with its own board, and a committee that's going to be registering members based on the following sectors: education, healthcare, tourism, agriculture, infrastructure, construction, power, and IT. So you belong somewhere. If you do anything else but register, that's going to be 75% of the work. Are you with me? It costs you nothing. And all you have to do is register. If your state is not yet organized, you can go to the auwashingtondc.org and register according to your sector. And please register as an individual, as a professional, and as a company. Because when we start reaching out, we want to be able to hit you whichever way we sort out. So yes, sir, we are on the move. We are organizing. Spread the word, but I'm sure to make sure I let Dr. Osei know when we establish the Delaware chapter. That's where we are. We're organizing, and we're going home.
Are you the chairman of the Delaware? The ambassador never
Yeah, hey, I'll come to the point. As Ambassador ma'am has already said that 75% of the job is done by registration. The 25%, as DSU and other similar HBCUs, will show you the way by starting pilot projects of the area of expertise we have. We will identify some countries. That's the way we can start with. That we start with small projects in identified target nations with our subjects of expertise, with smaller targets first, and then we go in a big way. So you have to wait till then.
First, I want to thank the brother for bringing up the issue of the mental aspect. That's very critical. Malcolm was big on that, and he always spoke about the need to liberate our minds and reconnect with Africa. Centuries of demonizing Africa has its consequences. It breeds inferiority complexes. Fanon discussed this in his books. There's somebody that I write about in my book, and I have copies that I'll share at the end. A reporter named Keith Richburg for the Washington Post. He was sent to cover the war in Rwanda, the genocidal war in 1990s. And he wrote an article in the Washington Post that he later developed into a book. And he said, as he witnessed the bodies floating in the rivers, he said to himself, "Thank you, God, for taking my ancestors into slavery." That's the kind of damage that demonization can do to the mind. This is a reporter, a black reporter, at the Washington Post. And he wrote a book that was widely promoted. That's the kind of mentality they like to promote, as opposed to people that try to counter that image. So yes, decolonizing the mind is where we must start. The young brother asked about the economic aspect. Africa is very wealthy. That's why everybody's in Africa. That's why the West colonized Africa. That's why the West still continues to exploit Africa. China is on the scene now as well. Africa's resources is used to build up everybody else except Africa. So we need, and that's why Nkrumah spoke about the importance of a united Africa. In Neo-Colonialism, the last stage of imperialism, I recommend it to every student, if you haven't read it, at the very least, read the introduction alone. It's about 10 pages. Neo-Colonialism, the last stage of imperialism. He said, if we don't come together, they will continue balkanizing Africa and exploiting the continent for its resources, just like they did during colonialism. So independence is going to be meaningless. That's what Nkrumah meant. He was talking about the continuation of economic exploitation of Africa if we don't come together. I think what we've started here as DSU is tremendous. It can really spark something phenomenal. I hope we can have an annual cultural gathering, bringing the youth from Africa to intermingle and exchange ideas with sisters and brothers in this country. And then finally, I go back to my book. I have copies. It's $20, but I know some students, I have been a student before, so I know students struggle. If you want it, I'll give it to you. But the professors, no, you pay $20. So I have some copies, meet me at the end, but any student, come up to me, I'll give you a copy of the book for free. Thank you, sisters and brothers.
I just want to say one quick thing here in relationship, and my brother here is really talking about it. Education is so important. I had a student in the class, I had given a reading, and I asked her if she had read the assignment. And she said, I read it, but I really didn't read it. And you see, there's a problem with a lot of young people today. There's an old adage, if you want to keep something from a black person, put it in a book. And I'm seeing too many, he's talking about historical figures, he's talking about pieces of work, and our young people do not know who these people are. They haven't been educated. They're missing it. Our music today is much different than when you played and you played. The messages that are coming out in the music today is terrible. It is self-destructive. You hear the F word, you hear the B word, and you hear the N word. Almost every song you listen to, that's the vocabulary. And as he said, it's pounded in your brain. And so what are you thinking about? Killing and this and this. We've got to stop the madness. And it's up to the educators and the students to become empowered. You are responsible for your own learning. You can't come to the classroom and expect to just, it's a two-way street. So I just felt compelled to say that, because that's the foundation of everything else we're talking about here.
And I just want to just complete the process. Once it's in the mind, then it gets in your spirit, and then it gets in your soul, and then you really have it, and it's you know, you can lock it in. Drop the mic.
Thank all of you. So all of our panelists will be around. We're followed by another panel and another panel following that. But later on at 7 in the BOA, there's going to be all sorts of events, dancers, food, and you'll have a time to mingle with them and ask them questions if you want to talk to them more. Thank you all for coming.